What's up guys, Specstar here today with a special video. I want to talk about what I believe to be the top 5 Draft League Z users in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. And for those of you who don't know, what I mean by that is basically most draft leagues will, after you pick your team, they'll allow you to select a few Pokemon that can be your Z user / Z captain. And basically, those are the only Pokemon on your team that are allowed to use Z moves. And I want to talk about what, in my opinion, are the best Z users and why. So without further ado, let's just dive into this. Evaluation method. And yep, these are all my opinions. No two people will rank them all the same, so you guys are going to disagree with me, probably quite a bit. And you're going to disagree with the next person, so really, I encourage you guys to comment your list down below. This is mine. I'd love to hear what you guys think about these things. And I'm assuming that Z attacks and Z status are both allowed. And of course, what I mean by that is some leagues will allow you to only use Z attacking moves like Dragonium Z Outrage, for example, and won't let you use utility Z moves like Z Sunny Day or Z Heal Block, all that fun stuff. So I'm assuming both are allowed. And rules change value. The value of Z users, how good they are, changes league to league. I mean, one Pokemon is going to have a different value if there's only one Z user, and it's going to have a different value if your team's allowed to have 3 Z users. So it really does vary rule to rule. I'm trying to cover this more generally speaking as a result. And I'm not counting mons that are frequently banned, so you're not going to see something like Magearna on this list. Of course, if something like Magearna is allowed, it would be at the top of the list. That thing is just absolutely busted. It sets up a shift gear and you get the right Z move for the matchup and you just plow on right through. So number 5 here, I have Thundurus, and I have here both Thundurus Incarnate and Thundurus Therian, and I'm kind of grouping them in together because they have the same coverage, the same type, they're the same Pokemon, but certainly they're drafted differently, and people have different opinions on which one they like better. Thundurus Therian has less speed, it has less attack, but it has more special attack, whereas the other one, vice versa, more speed, more attack. Thundurus Therian has a better ability though in Volt Absorb, giving it an immunity. Prankster's no slouch itself, but whenever you can get an immunity on a move that would otherwise be neutral, that's a big plus. Personally, I prefer Therian slightly, but they both have their perks. So I'm gonna dive into it here. The strengths of Thundurus is that it has good coverage, it has a lot of different options for Z moves. It has setup options with both agility and nasty plot. It has both physical and special sets and Z moves. And finally, this thing gets a good flying move because it is a flying type that used to occasionally run hidden power flying, but now with the power of Z moves, it can get that power with a Z fly. And weaknesses are that the stabs, both flying and electric, share a common resistance in electric. It's a one-trick pony. Whenever you see a Z Thundurus and it comes to a game, it's probably going to be using a Z move because it's so much better with a Z move than with an item. And limited flying options. One of its stabs is flying, and your only really real flying attack option is the move Fly itself. Could definitely use a better move on the special side. So its favorite Z moves to use are Fly, Thunderbolt, Sludge Wave, Focus Blast, Knock Off, and Grass Knot. And there are certainly more options like Superpower, all that stuff. Its value, it's a tier 1, almost always. If it's not in tier 1, it should be. And it's going to cost you about 15 to 17 points in a points draft. Of course, depending on how many points you have, what the point system is. And up in the top right, I have Ariados and Registeel. Now, These are Pokemon that pair very well with it. Not specifically Ariados, but anything really with Sticky Web. The reason it pairs so well with Sticky Web is because the Therian version is a little too slow to get sweeps without agility, generally speaking, and having that web's decreasing speed is huge. And the Incarnate version, of course it also benefits from the speed drop, but it also loves when you force Defogs because it can get a Defiant boost. And for those of you who don't know, Defog reduces evasiveness, and the ability Defiant increases attack 2 stages when a stat is dropped. So if you switch Thundurus Incarnate in and it's Defiant on a Defog, it's going to get +2 attack and become a monster threat. And something like Registeel or any good steel type's nice because it takes both ice moves and rock moves. Also, it's weak to ground moves, which Thundurus can come in on, and it can set up rocks, which make things easier for Thundurus. Now, the number 4 Pokemon I've got here is Kartana. And Kartana has an absurd amount of attack, terrible especially defensive bulk, speed that gets it just under the 110s at 348, and a really healthy defense stat. Kartana. Kartana's strengths include its incredible power, of course. I believe it gets past 500 if it's adamant. Something insane. It has incredible sweeping ability, and it has Beast Boost potential. This thing, you can either run it the Timid set, which I believe has 19 attack EVs on Timid with 19 attack IVs, no attack EVs. On a Timid set, then with max speed, that makes it so that if it gets a KO, its speed will boost instead of its attack. And it, of course, also is incredibly hard to switch in on or just take a hit from in general if it gets an attack beast boost, so that greatly increases its power as a ZV user. And its another strength is that it can cover its stab answers, so the best switch in you're going to see on grass and steel is of course steel, and it has Sacred Sword which hits those. It has coverage in knockoff and Sacred Sword which hit most of the things that are going to be able to take its stab, so that's very useful. Weaknesses. Its stabs share a common resist, just like Thundurus. Steel resists both its stabs. Another weakness is that it's predictable. Generally, based on the team matchup, it's not hard to figure out which Kartana is going to come. And HP Fire is everywhere. I once actually ran an HP Fire Mimikyu for this thing, and you do not need to invest a lot in Mimikyu's special attack to make sure Hidden Power Fire knocks this thing out. So you just have to be very careful about that. Its favorite Z moves are Sacred Sword, Leaf Blade, Knockoff, Smart Strike, Psycho Cut, and Tailwind. For those of you who don't know what Z Tailwind does, of course Tailwind doubles your speed for 4 turns, and the Z move increases your crit chance, so that makes a Leaf Blade crit pretty much all the time. So you get the speed boost and you start critting those Leaf Blades and you have the chance to crit your other moves, and that can be annoying to deal with, so it's a nice little niche move on it. Now for its value, the thing can either be tier 1 or tier 2. It started off in tier 1 and it's starting to move down to tier 2 in some leagues, so you will be able to find it in either. And in points it will generally cost you 14 to 16. It does like to pair with Slowking, which can take the fire moves, it can take the fighting moves that Kartana doesn't like to take. Also, Kartana has that massive specially defensive weakness, and Slowking has special defense up the ass. And Charizard Y has awesome offensive synergy with it, destroying some of the grasses and steels, which can kind of deal with Kartana. They just go well together. Number 3 is Garchomp. Now, Garchomp has 130 attack, speed that gets it up to 333, 80 special attack, and decent bulk, especially with rough skin. It doesn't aid the bulk, but it makes it easier or a better switching on certain things. So its strengths, it can either clean or break. It has both the power and the coverage to break through big walls, and it can also clean against more offensive teams. It makes use of Z utility with Z Sandstorm, which, for those of you who don't know, increases speed, and in leagues where it's allowed, you can use that with the ability Sand Veil to get an increase in invasion. It has phenomenal stab. Dragon and ground combination is about one of the best stabs in the game. And basically it has coverage to hit anything. Any Pokemon you can think of, Garchomp is able to hit with a good Z move. A lot of the Pokemon that come in on its stabs don't like getting the Acid Downpour, they don't like the Iron Tail, they don't like the Infernal Overdrive. For weaknesses, it definitely could use more speed. Speed isn't terrible, but it definitely could stand to have some more against particularly the more offensive teams. Of course, it has that quad weakness in Ice, and it does enjoy its item freedom, so if you're restricted to one Z user, it may not be the most ideal because a lot of times Garchomp's going to want to have a Scarf, it's going to want to have a Band, anything like that. It does like to have its items. And its favorite Z moves include Outrage, Stone Edge, Sandstorm, which I mentioned increases the speed, Earthquake, Fire Blast, and Iron Tail. And for its value, it's always going to be a tier 1, and in points it's generally going to cost you 16 to 18. And it pairs well with Sylveon, which comes in on a lot of the Ice type attacks and the Dragon type attacks, which this thing is weak to. And then there's Metagross, which can come in on, again, the Fairy, the Steel, the Dragon moves that Garchomp's weak to. Also, Garchomp comes in on the Fire moves that Metagross is weak to. So there's quite a bit of synergy with those two Pokemon. You throw all three of them together on a team, and you got a pretty nasty Fairy Steel Dragon Core, actually. So the next one, number 2, again, we've got two Pokemon. We've got Dragonite and Salamence. And I definitely could have separated them, but I thought it would just be easier to cover them both together. They're both almost equally as good. They're both very good Z users. They got the same typing. They both have abilities that make them take hits better in Multiscale and Intimidate, which I'll talk more about later. Salamence has more special attack. Dragonite has more bulk. Salamence has more speed. And of course, they've got different abilities. Generally, I think Salamence is a little bit better, but I definitely do like both. So on to the next part. Strengths. They have abilities conducive to setup. As I mentioned, Intimidate is going to decrease the attack of the Pokemon, which will allow Salamence to Dragon Dance. Also, it has Moxie, which means if it gets a KO, its attack is going to go up, which really makes that thing a monster. If it gets a KO after a Dragon Dance, you better have Ice Shard in the back or you're in for a long night. They both have great coverage, particularly Dragonite, but definitely both of them. Dragonite has phenomenal coverage from so many different types. Finally, a good flying move for both of them. These are both Pokemon with flying type that haven't really had a useful flying move before Z moves. And neither of them really care about item freedom, particularly Dragonite. Salamence might want to be a Scarf, but both of them, when they are Z users, they like to use the Z. And for weaknesses, of course, that Ice Baby and Rock's Hurt. So you definitely want to pair them both with good hazard control, especially Dragonite with Multiscale. You definitely want to keep that thing intact. Favorite Z moves. Fly, that's for both of them. Outrage for both of them. Fire Blast, mostly for men's. Dragonite likes Fire Punch a lot too. Iron Tail on both of them. Aqua Tail, a little bit more on Dragonite, but they both can use it. Salamence sometimes likes to go for Hydro Pump instead. And Thunder Punch on Dragonite and Thunder Fang on Salamence. Their value, they're both going to be tier 1s all the time. and their value is going to be 15 to 17 points. Generally, their cost is going to be similar. Sometimes you're going to see Salamence go for a little bit more. And what they pair well with, Alolan Ninetales, more so Salamence than Dragonite. That Aurora Veil makes Salamence so dangerous because it lets you run Moxie and still get set up. And Empoleon's great with both of them because it takes Ice Move, it takes Fairy moves, it takes on Steals, and it defogs, which is huge for both of them. In fact, some would call it the best defogger in Draft League format. Oh, it's also useful for getting up rocks for both of them. And honorable mentions. Before I get to number 1, I'm just going to talk about some of the other Pokemon that are great Z users in League format. There really are so many of them that I couldn't cover them all in the top 5 list. Celesteela. Celesteela is incredibly threatening, running an Autotomized set with the Z move. The reason it didn't make this list is just because the thing so often wants to be defensive and it's going to want to run Life Orb that you're not always going to want to put a Z move on it. Sometimes you're going to prefer to have that item freedom. Zygarde 50%. It's kind of in a similar boat with Celesteela that it likes its item freedom a lot, but Dragon Dance with a Z move is incredibly threatening on that thing. Tapu Koko, that thing has an incredibly powerful Gigavolt Havoc, and it's really nice to have a Twinkle Tackle on that thing for a lot of what comes in on it. And definitely don't sleep on Guardian of Alola, which is the Z move for Nature's Madness, which will do 75% of something's health. Tornadus Therian's a good option. It has a lot of speed and it has a ton of coverage that just, along with the speed, it's nice to be able to hit things with all those types of different moves. But again, it also likes item freedom. It likes to have Assault Vest, things of that nature. So it does get a little bit restricted by Z moves. Not nearly as much as Celesteela, but it does kind of like its item freedom a little bit. Heatran's a great Z user. Z Sunny Day, a Fire Blast, Solar Beam, a lot of good options for it. Kyurem Black is another one. It can just drop nukes if you turn Free Shock into Sub-Zero Slammer using ICM Z. There's just no switching on that at all. Registeel, maybe that's about it. Nothing else less taking that move. But again, it's a thing that likes to have Scarf. It likes to have Band, Specs, all that thing. Although do not sleep on Z-Hail. I love that set where you run Z-Hail, which sets the hail and increases your speed, and then you can run Blizzard, Fusion Bolt, and then a filler move. It's a pretty good cleaner, that set. And number 1, of course, we've got Blissey. You guys know that. Wait a minute, Blissey. No, that's not the real one. Number 1, we've got Landorus Therian. And for those of you guys who play League format a lot, I'm sure you knew this was coming. This thing is just phenomenal with the Z move. And let's dive into exactly why. Strengths. Intimidate aids setup. Just like with Ments, you drop the opponent's attack and then that gives you a lot of opportunities to set up. And there are opportunities to switch this thing in, which is a luxury for Z users because a lot of them need to wait until something gets knocked out to get in and start to set up. Landorus comes in on a ton of different Pokemon. It has dual immunities, being immune to both ground type attacks and electric type attacks. And just like 2 others on the list, it finally gets a good flying move with the Flyinium Z turning Fly and Supersonic Sky Strike. For weaknesses, it could definitely use more speed, but of course Rock Polish is going to be very nice on this thing. You can run Rock Polish, Swords Dance, or Dual Dance with both of them. And say it with me, Ice, quad weakness to Ice, it's always a pain. And another weakness is that it can't always commit to a roll. So it's another one, it's especially good in leagues where you can use multiple Z users because sometimes it likes to be a wall, sometimes it likes to run Scarf. It can't always get bogged down by the Z move. And of course, no one's saying you have to bring the Z move to every game, but you want to have a Pokemon that you can use a Z Crystal on every game. So on to the next. Its favorite Z moves are of course Fly, that is just a nuke, Stone Edge, Earthquake. Grass Knot's great for dealing with a lot of the bulky waters that want to come in on this thing. Superpower for pummeling, and Sludge Wave's good for a few niche Pokemon like Bulu and stuff. And value tier 1, it's going to cost you about 17 to 19 points. Generally, this is going to be one of the first Pokemon taken. So if you want to try this thing out, you better hope you get a high pick because it's going quick. It's a great Pokemon, a great Z user. And it pairs well with Suicune, which comes in and beats the water and ice types that can handle Landorus. And it definitely pairs well with Heatran, which also craps on the ice types. And they just have great type synergy together, although of course you want to bring in a water type with them because they're both weak to water or a solid grass. And that's going to be it for this list. In the conclusion here, I definitely hope you guys enjoyed this. I want to be doing more of these videos in the future, so if you guys like this and you want to see some more, I really encourage you guys to hit the subscribe or maybe just check out another video and see if you like the channel. Comment your favorite Z users below. If you got a different list, something you think is left off that should have been on there, or maybe just a story about something you did with a Z user. I actually have a pretty fun story myself. One time I was in a league where any Pokemon could use Z moves, like there wasn't specific Z captains, and I was in a semi-final game and I noticed that my opponent was a little bit weak to a very specific niche set, so I brought a Clefable against him with a Firium Z Sunny Day with Moonblast, Solar Beam, Fire Blast, and Sunny Day. So I get it in. He's got 4 Pokemon left. I set up the Z Sunny Day and I get a KO. He brings in Tyrantrum, and I know that I can live any hit, and if I can beat this Tyrantrum, then I'm just going to clean out the rest of his team. Clefable's going to get 4 KOs. I'll take it out with Moonblast. It goes for Iron Head, it flinches my Clefable, and then it KOs Clefable in the next turn. So I was this close to getting a 4 KO sweep with Z Clefable. And if you guys have any stories like that, I'd love to hear them in the comments section. And feel free to comment any questions you have. If you're wondering why anything's on this list, why anything wasn't on this list, if you have a Zeke user conundrum for a league, you don't know which one you want to use, I can give you advice on that. I've got a lot of experience in league format, and I've used a ton of different Z Pokemon over my tenure. So that's going to be it for the video, guys. Again, I really hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I want to thank you guys for watching, and have yourselves a good night.